All right. Hello and welcome to Beyond the Physical Summit with me, Sitara, your host. And I'm so excited about this guest today. This is my first business coach, Richard Taubinger. Did I say that right?
You did, yeah, thanks.
Yes. Amazing. So, Richard is one of the world's leading digital strategy and launch experts. He has worked with thousands of creators selling over 350,000 online programs via documentaries, summits, membership sites, and VIP programs. Richard is passionate about supporting concepts and creators that can influence the collective evolution of humanity and finding breakout strategies that increase visibility so that those with knowledge can teach, serve, and transform lives. He is the CEO of Conscious Marketer. And like I said, I am so honored and so blessed to have you here. Richard, is there anything that you would like to add to what you're going to be sharing here today?
I don't think so. I think we can just kind of flow with the interview, and it's a real pleasure to see you out in the world, kind of interviewing people and on your life's path. So this is all good stuff.
Yeah, it is. It is exciting. So I'll share a little bit of backstory and how I found you, which was a really interesting and, from my perspective, a very clearly synchronistic and divinely aligned connection. I had met a friend on Maui, and you meet people along the way. We became Facebook friends. He at that time was a carpenter, and I saw on his Facebook one day him standing in front of a sign that said Conscious Marketer. And at this point, I'd already started doing the psychic readings. I had stopped doing psychic hotline readings, which was a part of my history. Fun fact. But I messaged him and I said, "What are you into?" And he said, "Well, I've started working with this guy. He's a business coach. He's got these business coaching programs, and I can put you in touch if you want." And it was just so casual. Then you and I had our first conversation. And I remembered it was a $25,000 ticket. I'd never even considered anything around that price range before in my life. At that point, I think I was making $1,000 a month doing psychic readings, handing out flyers, trying to get involved in BNI, just like floundering, but knowing I was on my path. And so after our conversation, I remembered sitting in my chair, my meditation chair in my bedroom, and I just saw so clearly, this is your destiny. Like, and I don't usually see words. And so when I saw that, of course, monkey mind was there. How am I going to pay for it? What is my life going to look like? Da 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 da. But ultimately, I leaned in and I trusted that. I figured it out, came up with the payments and the money. And ultimately, obviously, it was one of the best decisions that I could have made. And so I just wanted to share, I wanted to share that in inspiration because, like, you weren't trying to find me. And when that happens, that's when I truly trust the alignment. I
Right.
wasn't marketed to, there wasn't, the advertising or anything like that. And so can you speak to that a little bit? And what is the difference? And one of the things that I really enjoyed about working with you is that you were also very tuned in and you could check in with your intuition in a moment's notice, which I
Yeah.
really appreciated. So I'd love to just kind of hear from you. How do you see like advertising and marketing and that sort of thing also working with like divine synchronicity and like divine order of connections?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I think it starts with the idea which you can choose to accept or not accept. It doesn't really matter to me. But mostly our minds have a lot of shit wrong, you know? And so if we lead our lives and are trying to figure things out and trying to control things, then generally um, it sometimes ends in a mess and sometimes it doesn't. So there are a lot of different ways, and I think the I'm not one of these people like throw the mind away and just follow your gut. I think there's like a blend where you start to do the work, um, and you tap into other sources of wisdom that are much more powerful. And I think the mind has, I mean, we're seeing this with AI now, you know, where, you know, any computer can crank out 1,000 more ideas than you can in like 4 seconds, you know? And so the question you can ask is, well, what's my differentiator? And well, it's not probably your ability to think about ideas, you know, or definitely to generate more ideas. The one of the key things that the human being has access to is a direct connection to your own source energy or your own source wisdom, and that can't be replicated by AI. AI can't connect with source. And when you start to connect to that higher self, or whatever you want to call it, self with a big S, not this little s, or whatever your word for it is, then you can start to get in alignment with what yours to do. And I'd say that then things like prayer and meditation and these practices that you hear from become much more effective. And I learned this prayer from a guy named Stuart Wilde, who's not with us anymore, but and I have a follow-on prayer that I learned from an indigenous elder from New Zealand. But basically, if you're trying to manifest stuff from your will and the idea of what you think should happen, you're going to get caught in working with the smaller s, or your ego. And you need that to manifest things, so that when you're given an idea, you can actually get shit done down here. Okay. So you can't throw that out, which is what a lot of the new agey people want to do. But if you're trying to drive it from that, then that's a problem. So the prayer is basically, how can I be of greatest service? And so I wake up most days and go, how can I be of greatest service today? You know, how can I align to help this person, or what do I need to know to grow my business, or to help this client, or to, you know, put in the path something so I can clear some karma that I've caused some pain in the past, or who do I need to forgive? Like, you know, these are good questions to ask. And then the trick is you just kind of let go. And then you have to, when that sign comes in front of you, not doubt it. And the follow-on prayer that I learned from Amari, indigenous elder, is, universe, I'm not the sharpest knife on the block. I'm paraphrasing here. So give me some signs, and give me 3 signs and make them really big, and make them like billboard size, because I'm a little bit dull, and I need like some really big signs, you know. And so if you're thinking of a major life direction, or should I work with a client, or whatever it is, this is important. And you know this, I know, but I'm going to share with your audience. They may not know this, but there's my hallucination is that there's a non-interference directive from source or from spirit, which means if you don't ask, it's not allowed to give you any assistance or help. It can give you snippets if you're really heading down the wrong way, because it could derail what you're here to do. So you need to ask in a way that's in alignment with spirit. Otherwise you won't get the signs. And so let me share 2 quick stories. One is when I was in Hong Kong, this was when I was shifting out of financial trading. I was a trader way back in the day. And I had written down in my journal, how do I clear the energy blocks in my body? And when I open this chakra, when I open my 8th chakra, then the first chakra also opens simultaneously. And how do I get how do these gates work? And so later that day, I was sitting in a coffee shop, and this kind of man waddles up and sits across from me. And I hear this, he's your teacher. And I'm like, oh, this is interesting. And he was quite overweight, and we talked about gold trading. And in the end, I go, what do you do? And he's like, oh, I teach energy work. I teach Qigong, and just in town for a day. And so that he developed, I initially became his student, and then I worked with him for many years and helped to develop his business. So there was this, but I'd been meditating in a room after trading for 8 months straight, and asking spirit, and taking trips to sacred places, and praying to the directions. It wasn't like that came overnight, you know, it was like a commitment. And then I needed to accept that sign, because he would have been easily dismissed. And I'll share another story from, was it Sunday? It was a couple days ago. I'm not whatever day you're listening to. It was actually it was yesterday. Actually, it was yesterday. So I'm doing some crazy things with my body. So I'm out running around 4:30 a.m. Doing about a 3-mile hike, and I'm thinking about a business deal that somebody's brought to me, and I'm thinking about it. And at the moment I start to think about the person and the deal, I look down and I jump over a snake. Now, if I didn't think the way I think, and if I didn't have the experience shamanically in other ways, I would just say, oh, that was just a snake. And I would have just moved on, and I would have kept thinking about the business deal and probably would have proceeded in a different manner. But I took that as a sign from the universe as it presented a snake that I had to jump over on my path in the middle of the morning. I also had bats fly into me and stuff like this, but these are other things that I don't share. But so that's a subtle sign that was a gift from the universe, in my opinion, that if I'm going to go into business with this person, there's a snake energy involved. And so that would mean that it wouldn't be out of blind trust. It doesn't necessarily mean I don't do the deal, but I would really be careful with this person in particular. And so in both cases, those stories are 18 years apart, but every day there's things that happen on your path. And the truth is most people are totally asleep to that. The universe. It's like if you ever had a kid that doesn't, I have 2 daughters, and you want to help them and tell them, and they just won't listen to anything you say. And so you have to find ways for them to be open to receive the guidance. And I think a lot of times spirits like that, in that it's trying to help you. It wants you to ask, but then you're not even asking, so it can't even help you. And then when it does give you a sign, you dismiss it as, oh, that was just a coincidence. And it's like, I mean, it's like the most frustrated, probably higher self. Your higher self is probably so frustrated. It's like, this has been like 78 lifetimes. Would this soul ever get this? Our guides must be just like banging their heads against whatever the door. There's no doors up there, but you know what I mean. Like they must be extremely patient, because we're quite stubborn, slow entities of consciousness down here, because we don't get this, because we're meant to forget. So I've gone on for a while. I'll pitch it back to you. So those are some just general ideas on like how you can access those other worlds. And as you start to do that with all parts of your life, your relationship, your business, your fitness, then you can start to get into this kind of flow where your life, you're not having to like force anything. It just kind of unfolds. We talked about a little bit about this right before you got on. It just kind of unfolds right before you, and you're kind of being led where you need to go. It's almost like the play is already written, and it's kind of seeing like if you can follow the script or not. And then obviously there's some free will in there too. So that's what makes it an adventure.
Yeah, absolutely. When I was in my early 20s, getting my degree in psychology, my best friend's mom gave me the book Many Lives, Many Masters. And when I was 12, I remembered my first past life, like very viscerally. When I was about 8 or 9, I started really being aware that I was seeing beings, and had a hyper attunement, but I didn't have the support or guidance in my life to help me understand what was going on.
If I
So
remember, you had a grandmother. Is that right? Was it a grandmother, or you had a guide back then, didn't you?
I I've had many. I've definitely had many. My grandmothers, luckily have all been alive. Um, I did, yeah. I've been really, really fortunate that I was actually born with 4 great grandparents.
Wow.
And yeah. So I'm gonna be here for a while. And through that also, I do have a very strong guardian team. Um, but what I was going to say with that, because you brought in the word free will, and yes, before we started recording, I was talking about fate, and I had an experience in Dubai where I was holding destiny in my hands, and I didn't comprehend before that moment that destiny was something that was so tangible, I could feel it. And I mean, other than I guess that note of like, this is your destiny, knowing to lean into this, I wrote a report. Getting my degree in psychology, I was very disappointed that they only focused on measurable psychology. If there wasn't an instrument or technology to measure it, it was considered woo and it was thrown out. And to me, I was like, their explanation for schizophrenia and multiple personality disorder was just not suffice for me. And so as I started exploring more of the transpersonal, I found a book by Dr. Brian Weiss, same author of Many Lives, Many Masters, called Same Soul, Many Bodies. And he talks about, well, if we can past life regress, then we can also future life progress. And so I got very curious about this. Because for me, reading other people's past lives always felt like time traveling. I felt that I was an energy that was there in the room, or that I was there in the space, that it wasn't a separate sort of thing. So I started really, really musing on how free will, destiny, and fate interact with us in this world. Because I'm with you in that train of thought that if we don't pray, or if we don't open the request to our angels and guides and source, our higher self, that they are not allowed to interfere or come into play and, like, basically carve the path for us, that's part of our own soul's ascension journey. And because we have free will on this planet, we can choose not to step into our destiny. We can choose to, completely forego it, to prolong it, to miss checkpoints, to basically like disrupt what could be our golden timeline, or I use that term to describe our highest and best path of most joy, most success, most service. Of course, there's still going to be lessons on that path. And destiny being that ultimate through line basically being, well, let's say in a soul contract, because I've also been able to remember the moment that I, as a soul, chose to come into this body. And I remembered acknowledging the trials and tribulations. I remembered agreeing to the role my mother and father would play. I remembered seeing all this like written out in the contract. And I remembered having telepathic communication or conversations with my mother before she incarnated, knowing that these agreements were going to play out in the way they were going to play out. And knowing that that's part of the destiny. And then the way that I see fate is that fate is almost like the bumpers on a bowling alley when you go bowling, and fate is basically like, well, you're getting a little too far off. Like it bounces you in, and it's a really strong energy that whether you're praying for it or not, you'll see the signs and you'll like feel it in your bones. It's one of those very strong, undeniable sensations that, well, this is my path, whether my monkey mind or egoic fear-based consciousness wants to resist, or whatever it is. It's like, it's so strong that it's undeniable. And that would actually even bring me into launching the Earth Angels program, because that was the course that I launched when I was in your course for that year. And I remembered in about July, I started getting guidance for that, and that I was going to be launching my own $25,000 program. And my mind was like, what? Like, there's no way. I had all these reservations. I was like, absolutely not. And then it was just like slowly but surely that energy of what I would say fate started stepping in and encouraging my own maturity and encouraging my own evolution to release the resistance that I had to that guidance, which then led me to launching and selling it out. I want to say almost effortlessly. Of course, like, yes, was I having enrollment calls? Was I doing the videos? Was I going through, like you're saying, the combination of the things that you need to do to put it out there? For sure. And simultaneously, there was just such a deep, deep knowing that I was following, that was what I was meant to do. And I could feel the soul contracts that go beyond email listing and messaging and marketing. It was like I could feel those connections coming into my life. And in the times of my business, when I have initiated something based on, like you were saying, an egoic idea, it's just flopped. It's been like, oh, well, this works, so let's do the similar model, let's just do it again. And it just like, it just doesn't. And partly because it's just like not so much meant to be. But when it comes from that deeper space or that guidance, like for me, the deeper space would be like my gut intuition that follows through. And then the higher guidance would be something that comes in through the crown, and being able to discern where is it coming from and how to connect that before initiating is when I have found that just clear stream of, okay, this is the path, and it opens up. And it comes with patience and waiting for sure.
I mean, mostly I think you learn that because you don't follow that and you try to do it the other way, and then you get a lot of painful
Mm-hmm.
lessons, and then at some point you're like, okay, I'm going to start to do it this way, and then there is a point where if you start to violate that, like you literally almost get physically ill, like you'll feel it in your body to such a degree. And then when you're really on your path, there's such conviction that almost nothing can pull you off, and so you can take extreme, I'm on one side, I'm like working with leading meditation teachers. On the other side, I'm like talking to elite Navy SEAL trainers and people that are doing extraordinary things, because it's kind of the same energy. You need to be able to have the fierceness to face anything in the inner world, but also like be able to handle anything outwardly. And a lot of times that means doing the hard thing that you're meant to do, even though your mind doesn't want to do it because it wants to be lazy or wants the easy path, or is chasing some new opportunity, is another version. And then your higher self is going to test you to make sure that you're ready too, generally. I mean, otherwise it's not even so much testing you, it's just trying to reveal what's already true within you, whether you've aligned or not, because once you're aligned, then it's just the nature of who you are. It's important to mention too that, coming back to what you said before about the psychology missing the spiritual, there's a trend now with different psychological systems like IFS, internal family systems, and Thomas Hubel and Gabor Mate, and compassion inquiry, and work of David Hawkins. It's not just one teacher, and then really all the highest spiritual teachings on the planet also confirm that basically there's a barrier of consciousness that stops with the highest levels of the mind, and that really all experience in a human mind, including the scientific data, is subjective. And so there's a point on the highest spiritual journeys that maybe like less than 0.5% of the population, probably much less actually, where your beingness goes from mind into essence, and then or from perception of outward senses and inward senses, even to from perception to essence. And almost all the teachings are like the highest spiritual levels when you can just quiet the mind and go and then to be tapped into your essence. And so this is across the board of most, not exoteric religions, but inner religions. And the beautiful thing now that's happening in the world with the psychology is they're starting to bridge a lot of the psychology into the spiritual worlds, which has really never been done before. It's only like, I'd say, the last 5 years. So we're at a precipice of a precipice, or there's a bridge across the precipice now that's never existed before for human consciousness. And this is super exciting because as those things start to blend together and that bridge develops, more people will have the ability to do the deeper spiritual work, whatever you want to call that, advanced levels of consciousness, karma clearing, going to oneness or unity. And this is important because on the other side, you have all this AI stuff going on. And so this is the world we live in, and it's really just started like in the last 5 years. So it's interesting.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what this summit and Beyond the Physical is about, is bridging, like for me personally, being I stepped onto my path when I was 21 years old and really started healing and awakening my own psychic abilities, and really stepped into my healing journey. And by what I would call fate, was really pulled into the higher, like really high levels of the crypto world and the crypto culture and what was going on there. And it was not because I was seeking it out. It came to me in a very interesting kind of way. And I absolutely believe that there is a correlation between what is going on with human consciousness and how humans are evolving in that way to hold a greater capacity of conscious understanding and technology, and how the technological leading edge, as I would say, the digital revolution that we're living in, is leading the way also by what we're able to do by speeding up the quickening. It's like the speeding up the quickening of time. Like you're saying, a human could sit down, and even art would take, a piece of art would take, 20 to 30 hours of something that's amazing, and on the computer is now being replicated like boom, 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 boom. Same with ideas, same with content, same with even articles. In my experience in working with Chat GPT and seeking it out, it really misses heart. It's very linear, it's very black and white. Even if you're talking about something that is along heart-centered consciousness around that, it's still missing that piece. And so as I have aspirations this year to get on more stages um, and speak about intuition in business and all this stuff about AI and robots being able to replicate intuition, I call BS on it 100%, simply because they have the database to be able to find the information that speaks about intuition, but the intuition of the consciousness itself being able to speak through, I'm calling BS, because it's one of those things that you can feel. It's a felt experience. Intuition is felt. It isn't explained, and it isn't mind to mind. And to speak to what you're saying with the bridge of the science, just science evolving to be able to explain what psychics have been saying for thousands of years. For me, the most exciting piece of that, to summarize in one word, is epigenetics. Like we have been saying, and I'll say for me in this one lifetime, which I have access to lifetimes before this one, but in this one lifetime, to be able to, one, learn about biology in high school and hear junk DNA. We were taught that 96% of your DNA is junk DNA because science cannot explain it. Again, calling BS. I'm like, this makes no sense, you guys. So then we have the capacity and the ability. And this is why I chose the psychic path rather than the path of psychology. When I started doing readings, I was able to answer the questions that I needed answered, which was, why was I in the family that I was in? Why did I have the experiences in childhood? Why? Like psychology couldn't answer why. Psychology could answer, okay, well, this is how you deal with the feelings. But I wanted to know why. That I'm a why investigator. I'm curious in that way. I was able to see on a much bigger soul level where I had the power to rearrange the karmic scripts. And if I was able to rearrange the karmic scripts and I was able to start saying, like, the buck stops here with me, which psychology would say it takes 5 years or 5 generations to break a pattern of abuse in a family. Well, there was a history of abuse in my family. And so there were certain patterns that I had to break. And so I started to recognize that I could do that on an energetic and soulful level. That it wasn't just, well, I'm choosing to not do that if and when I decide to grow a family or have a family. But for me, there was a much bigger component that was going on, which I would say scientifically, but I didn't have the instruments to prove it. There was just a deep knowing that genetically there was a purging moving through my body and my own consciousness. And Joe Dispenza has been so incredible about actually developing the research required to prove that epigenetics and the clearing of those ancestral woundings is not only possible, it's actually happening. It's happening when we do these things. So we can rewrite family predisposition to disease. We can rewrite these things. And on emotional and energetic level, I really believe that when we are, I call it pickled, when we're pickled in that environment, meaning we're in a household where, let's say 7 generations back, there was a heartbreak that was so gut wrenching that emotionally that ancestor carried that wound and just passed on that wound of that subconscious heartbreak, so that heart issues or heart problems, there was a predisposition in that family line. Well, if we're able to clear that, then we can actually reconstruct that genetic kind of pathway to develop a healthy and strong heart-centered awareness and heart-centered consciousness that actually overturns what's been passed down generationally. And that, man, I get so excited about. Just the fact that that's here and that people are getting to a point of being able to receive it. It's, I mean, it's a wild time to be alive. It definitely is a wild time and wild and exciting time to be alive.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I've launched recently some programs on ancestral healing, and it's really powerful work, and it's quite unknown from most of the population in the West, unless um, you have to be pretty far down even the psychology rabbit hole to get into the ancestral stuff. I think the indigenous people have probably been the carrier of a lot of that wisdom through time. But it's definitely re-arising, and I think as Americans we sometimes lack the ancestral connection because we feel a little bit homeless, as a general rule. I live in Europe now, so there's a little bit of a stronger pull backward in time. Americans tend to push forward into time a bit more into the future, but that's also, like you mentioned before, there you can push in forward into time as well into future lifetimes that have already occurred. So that's a little bit harder for the mind to wrap around.
Completely. And that's also why I get excited about heart consciousness. I think Joe Dispenza is also one of the only leaders, not to say that there aren't others, but that really go into, well, he talks about head and heart coherence. I really focus on heart consciousness because the consciousness of the heart bypasses the mind. And like you're saying, there is a limit to the mind. The mind can comprehend only a certain amount of information at a given time before it really has to digest it. I'm of the belief that our heart has the consciousness of our past, present, and future simultaneously. And so if our heart is blocked, if our heart is in pain, if we're holding grudges, and this is also where if we go into, like, I'm just going to go swimming outside like the norm a little bit right now. If we go into like the powers that be, if there is an agenda, and part of the agenda is to devalue relationship and to devalue, and this is where we have Tinder and Grindr and so much free access to porn in the United States and other countries. We have drinking so socially acceptable, and especially in those younger years of college and early 20s, that like it's so unbelievably socially acceptable. And in fact, it's almost like you're a square if you're not going out and basically just sabotaging and going wild and like doing all these crazy stuff. Well, ultimately, what it does is it devalues and deconstructs the brilliance of your heart and how your heart can connect with others and how your heart can connect in union and community and trust and all of these things. Well, then to reconfigure and put the heart back together to where I believe to access the soul compass and the soul map is in the interconnectedness of the heart. And so in that space, we're able to transcend space and time, but it has to be by accessing the center of the heart-centered awareness, because your higher self has access to past, present, future at all times. Well, that consciousness isn't actually outside, it's inside. But if we're not able to access and open our heart, then we're limited. And in my exploration of understanding who I am, and having hearts tattooed on my fingers and hearts in every single piece of art I've ever made, starting to understand that there is a wisdom that is deeply embedded within us already. And the Bible says, the kingdom of heaven is within. And that kingdom of heaven within being not in the eye of the mind, but in that interconnectedness and heart-centered consciousness. And so that's really the core of my own personal revolution is continuing to remind people of that connection internally and of that connection to their own heart, because you can literally in a snap of a fingers, once you know how to do it, clear lifetimes of karma, clear lifetimes of entanglements, clear all sorts of grudges and stuff, and like embodying forgiveness on a different level when that connection is truly made. um and it gets, again, that's what I get really excited about is how can we find that wholesome nature, and how can we return to that divinity of sacred union, and what that means for us as a collective whole. And yeah, and also like where we're going um globally, what countries and what schools of thought and what laws and what restrictions also are supporting that. um
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely that heart center is so important, and um, the seat of your soul is in the center of the chest there, and so a lot of people get their throat chakras cut, and then their crowns cut, and so they're spiraling up here, and then if they do have the insight, it's intermittent, and sometimes there's an intermittent connection with the soul thread, and then other times there's intermittent connection with the physicality of the heart center. And so the beauty is we have lots of practices like yoga or breath work and meditation and all kinds of practice where you can become aware. I think what's interesting is I don't really hear people talking about the flow and how really what you want to do is whatever practice. There's tons of practices that you can take or take. It's like take a medicine, but the key is really to bring it into everything, into your everyday walking around the street or at the store with your kids or wife or in traffic, and just notice whether this part is tense or this part is closed, and continually open. And then if you open this too, it helps ground you down, because otherwise you just spin. So it's you need some like trigger points to keep checking in on an ongoing basis. So if you're spiraling out, just open those channels up, and then you get the flow going back in.
which
I
is
got a
easier
question.
said than done sometimes.
It is, well, especially if you're in stress or you're in distress, or you're, then the brain functions differently, and then your hormones function differently, and so most people are living in that state almost 24/7. So that's just the nature of how most people live their lives, actually. I know that you help healers. I'm kind of curious if we could share or talk a little bit about the blocks that prevent people from getting their work in the world, because I think that there's these narratives and these spiritual blocks, but I think also those manifest when they get their work in the world. And that's kind of the work that we do, is we help people that don't like marketing to get their work in the world. And I think that it's almost like there's ancestral marketing blocks, because we're so programmed to hate marketing and to hate sales, and or to see it as completely separate from whatever real thing we do, whether it's psychology or healing or whatever your thing is. But what we sometimes talk about when we're working with clients is how to merge those two worlds, so that in marketing or in the work you're bringing to the world, they just become one thing. Because if you move into this thing where you want to help people and you want to improve the world, what happens is you get in front of a camera or you start to do your program, and all of a sudden you block the top chakra, and then your voice blocks. And then when you get on camera, you're like, this is weird. I hate social media and all the scripts. I shouldn't have to do this. I should outsource it to somebody else. And I think a lot of it is because you're not, or you aren't, or I've done this in the past. So I was speaking personal, like I used to think, oh, it's just, I'm not good on camera or whatever. But really what it is it was my own blocks that prevented me from getting my work in the world, because I was trying to separate these two things. And so this was kind of something we discovered many years ago. And it's kind of how we help people, because if you can see that getting on front and doing a video on some social platform, whichever one it is just as much a teaching and a being service of the world, and you don't have to sell anything even, then people will start to trust you and kind of be drawn to work with you, or at least, or even if they don't work with you, you're helping the world out in some way. And so this is kind of the path of, of bigger teachers and people just starting out. It doesn't really matter. But I think the world needs more of that for consciousness to change. If you're like sitting in your bedroom and not getting online, or you're teaching your like 7 people in your local class, like that's good. I mean, one of those people could be the next Jesus or Gandhi or Obama or whatever, whoever your person is. But I think the world definitely needs more people who are going beyond the physical to bring that into the mainstream through the work that they're doing. I don't know. I'm kind of curious with you. What are some of the things that you've seen that have helped people overcome that block to getting their work in the world?
The what I would say the block is, if I could just kind of pinpoint it, really is the fear of the responsibility. It's and that like encompasses such an umbrella of how self-sabotage shows up in that way. But I remembered, like for instance, the first real big jump that I had, right, was going from doing one-to-one to the Earth Angels program. I knew 1,000 times over, just in the core of my being, that once I launched the Earth Angels program and once I was in that role, my life was going to completely change. And my life was going to completely change by means of how I was required to show up as a leader and how I was required to show up as a role model, because that was literally the position that I was putting myself in voluntarily. And I was 27, I think. Like I was still young. And I remembered I remembered laying in my bed one day and it was a weekday. Should have been a work day in our, 9 to 5 mentality. And I remembered laying in bed and reading until noon because I deliberately knew my life was going to change and that was not going to be an option. And so I wanted to soak it up while it was there. Um, and that's like the number one thing that I see as the block. How that shows up is lack of self-trust, lack of self-forgiveness, not reconciling old patterns, holding a grudge, or still punishing yourself for being the villain in somebody's story. Like we've all screwed up. We've all accidentally screwed somebody over. We've all, in past lives probably murdered somebody. When we start to see those things, we have to be like, "Oh, that was me." Like I have to accept that. And so there are parts of it, and I just actually had a clip of one of my events pop up where I was talking about confidence. Because confidence, once I got into the role with the Earth Angels program, I realized that confidence was the hardest thing for me to teach, because and after I started, studying confidence, and confidence is ultimately consistency. It's us consistently showing up for ourselves in a way that knows that, okay, I know that when I say something, I'm going to do it. Then you have self-trust, and then you have built self-confidence. If you are not standing up to even the small promises that you said to yourself, like if you're saying, I want to wake up before 8 a.m. every morning, and you're sleeping until 9, you're completely destroying the relationship that you have with yourself and that value of self-trust. And so for me, it really comes down to, what is that person's relationship with themselves? Because that person's relationship with themselves is going to overflow into every relationship that they have thereafter. And if they're wanting to show up as a role model, but their actions don't match their words, then they themselves know that they are out of integrity. And it's not necessarily anything that anybody is watching them, but they then see how they're showing up. And so there's certain ways around how do we encourage that. And the way that I teach psychic development is not what you would think. It's very subtle, and it's almost in a way that my clients don't even know that it's happening until they go, I'm not seeing anything. And I go, close your eyes. Imagine this. What are you seeing? Okay, you are seeing something. So you didn't actually believe that your clairvoyance was increasing because you didn't acknowledge that what you're using when you close your eyes is your clairvoyance. And so it's like it's a very subtle way. And I see that also with that responsibility. It's like we have to take these steps in a way that we feel solid with every step that we're taking, to be able to rise into the willingness to be visible, and the willingness to be on stage, and the willingness to hold ourselves accountable. And so in that whole, like, it's a lot deeper than just like, why aren't you showing up? Like, why don't you want to do this? And I also believe that that actually has to do with marketing. Like if a person, one of my favorite phrases is vibrational integrity. if a person is not in vibrational integrity, meaning that they are not in some way showing up as who they say they are, or also meaning that they're not quite ready, that big success would kind of throw them for a loop, in the sense, like an example would be winning the lottery and then losing all the money and destroying your life, and like that whole story that we know so well. um, that there are certain ways also in which our growth and our visibility, even through marketing, is tempered. And so when we are genuinely and actually ready is when it's like that game at the carnival where you have the big hammer and you hit the thing and it just goes do, and you know, you hit the bell. That there's a finesse but also compound interest that goes into it. And that's where and why everybody's path is different. Are some people more embodied in being able to have that happen seamlessly and easily? Sure. Are there some people that are still working through karmic ties and background and like ancestral wounding and stuff? Like some people just have a bigger load. And so I think it's kind of the whole ball, but to shortcut it, like what do you focus on? Like you were saying, it's focusing on the openness. Keep opening the heart. When you find that point of constriction, when you find the point in the crown, like just focusing on the opening rather than focusing on the shadow work, rather than the story and the journaling and like it doesn't. I had someone get really triggered with me the other day when I told them that they didn't have to go through the photo album to heal. They didn't have to remember the repressed memories. They didn't have to go digging, digging, digging in order to continue ascending. It's like when you ascend, those lower frequencies just kind of melt away. And when they melt away, you're just stepping into another field of that energetic ascension.
Yep.
I've noticed my memories just like dissolve. Certain
Mhm.
things just dissolve. People, places, things, stories, they just dissolve because that information is no longer like necessary. So
Yeah, well, you're a different person. I'm a different person than I was 6 months ago. And
yeah.
I kind of like to think of the past as it's useful to go through the past if you haven't learned the lesson of the past, whatever that lesson is. But once you learn the lesson, then a lot of that stuff you can let go. I really like keeping the commitments to yourself. And personally, I found that, as having clients is a great feedback mechanism for that, because I have to make commitments to them, almost every day.
Yeah.
And so then I have to meet those. But am I a day late? Am I 2 days late? Am I 2 days early? Then it starts to come. You kind of set a standard, and I'd say a couple things, because I think that people nowadays, there's this thing that everything should be easy, and I would just throw out there that if you can accept that some things are hard and then train yourself, go running when it's hard, or make 10 calls instead of 5 calls, or write the email when the first thing you get up rather than the last thing you do right before deadline, so there's something about doing the hard things and leaning into the hard things as a way of living, because then everything becomes easier. It's
Right.
kind of funny.
Right.
And then realizing that that your mind is telling itself it's going to do certain things and then breaking those promises. And so that it does fracture the integrity. And then when you go online, you have less vibrational integrity, vibrational power, and it just comes through you. It's not anything you're going to say or not say. It's in your energy field, So I think for me, there's a couple of things that can help that. One is having a client or something that you're committed to as a benchmark. And then whatever your craft is, it's also, there's a standard for most things in the world. Like if you want to become a Navy SEAL, as an example, this probably isn't your target market, but you have to get through Hell Week and BUDS. There's a standard that's set, and it's very high. Like most people don't make it, If you want to be talking to angels and helping people to see their past lives, a casual meditation every couple weeks when you want to do it is not the answer, you know,
No.
like it's just as hard as the Hell Week and Navy SEALs. No, you're not physically, but inwardly, you got to do so a lot of hard things, and you have to be consistent. The nice thing is you don't have to do it all at once, and you can do it every day. And so these are pathways where you start to keep your promises. I think one of the best ways to do it is some kind of physical discipline. Um, it could be eating discipline or breathing or water, because generally we are human animal beings, and we have to overcome the animal nature, and the food and the workouts we tend to lean into the animal nature of what we want to do versus what we should do. And then you have to go to the higher context and then allow the self to drive us rather than the lower self. So I think it's definitely an activator. I mean, we could talk about the health of most American people, or actually globally. But it's a sign of the willpower decreasing and people breaking promises on an ongoing basis. And it's not about weight or anything like that, but even like drinking water, like how few of us drink the amount of water we should drink. I'm a danger of that one too. So something I'm working on. Yeah. So do hard things, and then keep those promises. As you start to keep the promises on the small things, then you can go for the bigger things. You can, with your training, there's really it's like the ability to find mentors like you to go wherever you want to go in any area of your life is unsurpassed right now. And the ability to get the information. So what's missing? It's the mindset, it's the inner game. And really you can choose that. You can say, look, I'm willing to see what I'm really capable of this life. The thing that kind of stabs me in the back the most is if I get done with this life and I knew that I only achieved like 20% of what I was capable of, and I could have done a lot more. Like it's like a dagger in my heart even now. So that's kind of what drives me. I don't know what drives other people. I think you have to find your own thing. You have to find your own motivation. But that idea that you just didn't live fully, you didn't complete things, that's just so disheartening to me. There's like this phrase, like the 1%. Are you part of the 1%? My sneaky suspicion is most people are operating at 1 or 2% of their capacity. It's not even like 20% or 30%. Like it's more severe. Our current climate is much more severe, but the pathways to get there, this is exciting. Yeah, this is exciting stuff. The pathways to get there, the mentors, the knowledge, it's there. It's just a hair's breadth away for all of us to go from if you knew that you were only operating at 2% of your capability. Isn't that an interesting question? Like where you're at now, or your daily life, you're operating at 2%. Like how would that affect how you thought about what you could actually achieve and what you went for? And then, I mean, even if you went from 2% to 4%, you'd be like, that's 100% increase of whatever your output or your karmic load. Like this is like good stuff,
Absolutely.
So you start to kind of like have these little mind shifts, and I kind of see the potential. And I have a personal trainer, and I remember I lost a little bit of weight because I've been consistent, and I found somebody to help me. But I remember being about 20 pounds down. And he's like, okay, only 30 more to go. And I'm like, are you crazy? Because he could see my real potential. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And that was like, okay, you lose the weight, and then the real work begins to build up and to really get in peak, so it's like, he's like, yeah, this is like a 3 or 4 year journey. And I'm like, oh my God, like I'm like a year in, and I'm like, he sees what I can't see because he's helped people to get there. But teachers for meditation or intuition or all this, they can see what you can't see, but then you got to do the work, and if you approach it from this wishy-washy, I'm going to do it when it feels good, or when when I have the time, it's the objection. I really it's like a dagger in my heart. You're never going to have the time. There's no like mythical future where all the time your calendar is going to open up and your bank account's going to be full and your kids aren't going to need you, and your partner is you're not going to feel guilty for leaving your partner for 2 weeks because you need to go do a meditation retreat or travel to India or whatever the thing is, like there's never right time. That's an illusion. So So that's not a good excuse. We can go through all the objections and think, okay, really, they're pathways for you to learn whether you want it enough and whether you want to go be a 2%er in life or be maybe a 50%er or maybe even 95%er, you know? And if you get above 50, you're in an echelon of your own, and there's not a lot of company there. I got to be honest. I
There's
think that
not.
there's just not a lot of company, and
There's
that's
not.
where, but the good news is there's an attractor field as you start to elevate, and your level of companions will find you at those levels in this world or in the inner worlds too. That's the other thing, you know? So this is good stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah, the question that keeps popping up for me as you're explaining this is like, because I'm a why, right? I like to know the why. Why are people choosing? Because I really do think it's a choice. Why are people choosing to siphon their power? Why are people choosing? Because there are certain things that we do that devalues our power and minimizes our power on a consistent basis. One of them I see as a huge one is alcohol. It's like you might as well just be like draining the power of your energy and what you're capable of, depending on how often you're doing it. And
I'd add to that processed foods and sugar.
oh
I'd
yeah,
say that sugar, alcohol is a form of sugar too, but I'd say sugar consumption or even like refined carbs and stuff, that does sap your energy more than I would say that most people haven't even gotten to the point where they can choose, because they're actually a lot of people are out of alignment with their physical structure, and so those things they just drain your energy. You go, you know, so you don't even have because what you have to do is go beyond the mind. This is beyond the physical, right? So you have to go beyond both the physical and your thought form to hit the context, and you have to hit the witness state at the very base level. At only at that point do you even have choice. So if somebody's over identified with their mind in the physical structure, stuck in there, or it's a low vibrational energy, they don't even have choice. They don't even have the ability to make choice. But if you're listening to this now, just realize that's part of the pathways to clear I mean, on any spiritual tradition, is physical practices to open up the energy centers and to clear the body and to detoxify and stuff like that. So there's like a spiritual fitness thing, you know? And again, it's not about weight or not weight or what you eat or what diet, but it's about the choice point there.
yes. The biggest difference that I've noticed, because I've done fruitarian diet, I mean, I've gone pretty extreme in all sorts of dieting and cleanses over the last 10 years. Um, Honestly, the biggest and number one thing I've noticed that makes a difference is digital cleansing. Um,
Mm-hmm.
One of them, easiest way, is no phone or no technology after 8 p.m. and no phone or technology before 8 a.m. That
Right.
includes music, that include like literally anything technology. I start reading more, I start doing more art. When I'm arting, my creativity opens, the channels start flowing, I get super clear guidance, and it's literally more than diet or exercise or cleansing in that way. And if I do them together, because I usually do some form of a cleanse for 30 days and the digital reset, it makes the biggest, hugest difference. That's when I literally will have meetings with my future self coming in, showing me what the pathway is, showing me what the choice points are. Yeah, it's so beautiful and it's so incredible when we really start cultivating that. So I want to say thank you so much for your wisdom. Thank you so much for sharing. Is there anything that you would like to share with our audience before we go ahead and close this off? Any last thoughts?
No, just I think you're doing great work. If anyone has a chance to work with you, they should
Thank you.
go join our programs. If you're looking into that world, I can't think of a better mentor. If you want to know more about what I do, you can go to consciousmarketer.com. I think we have like an opt-in gift there. You can see some of the people we've worked with and kind of our approach to marketing if you're needing help in that direction too.
Beautiful. Richard, again, thank you so much. I'm so honored and so grateful that you have been here. When I started thinking, who did I want to invite? You were definitely one of the first names that popped up. And I'm just so grateful for your continued support throughout the years and excited to see how both of our paths unfold. I think that's the coolest thing about growing up and getting older is seeing how people are shaping themselves in the world and what that impact is. So thank you for being a role model. Thank you for leading so many people in so many brilliant ways and supporting some of the big names. Are these is your I don't know what I would say, your portfolio listed on the website of so that people can see who you've worked with before?
Yeah, we've worked with some pretty big spiritual names. I tend not to do the whole name dropping thing, but we've had a lot of fun and affected a lot of meditation teachers, psychologists, and people that are out there doing good things and changing consciousness and getting their programs out in the world. So that's it's been fun. It's been a good path.
And
We'll see
yeah,
where it
and so
leads.
for that, I want to say thank you for your role in helping to push forward on their momentum, their dreams, their visions. Like, obviously, we all need people in that way that support us and believe in us. And so, for those ones that have influenced millions on a vast scale, like, thank you for your role in that. So,
Oh, thank you.
you're
All
welcome.
right. Blessings
Yep.
to you and your community. Well, this has been fun. Let's do it again soon.
All
Okay.
right. Sounds good. Have a
Okay.
beautiful day.
Bye for now.